An off-duty cop was busted after a biker rally spiraled into violence this week. Now, if you haven't seen the video, it is shocking. So here on Fresh Outlook, we are going to delve into the police world and talk about why some cops become criminals. Take a look.
An NYPD undercover detective was arrested Tuesday on riot and criminal mischief charges in connection with an attack on a family in an SUV by a group of motorcyclists. His attorney had previously said the detective, a 10-year veteran of the police force, had only witnessed other bikers attacking the vehicle. But investigators have since discovered video evidence reportedly showing him punching an already damaged back window, then twice kicking the side of the SUV before leaving the scene. The detective did not come forward to disclose his presence at the scene for 3 days. But who really is to blame for invoking the September 29th incident? Is it the SUV driver for hitting the motorcycle, or the mob of bikers for assaulting the SUV and driver?
If I was driving with my family and I felt threatened by the bikers, I'm going to do whatever it takes.
I think that the driver, he's the one that had to face charge because he saw what he was doing.
6 people have been arrested. 4 bikers have been criminally charged in the case.
And joining us now here on Fresh Outlook is Dr. Chuck Williams from Drexel University and political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi, who joins us with Dee Dee Benkie, of course, and myself to talk about this case. And thank you for being here, gentlemen.
Nice to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this case. Now, we obviously have some footage, obviously some video, so it's made this story continue, and everybody seems to be talking about this one. But it was pretty shocking to see that. Right. Was this an isolated case, first of all? And let's just weigh in on, get everybody's thoughts, first of all. And then I want to talk about the rise of police violence. So, Dee Dee, we'll start with you.
Well, obviously, these bikers were antagonizing this driver, and they're in the wrong. I mean, you know, what? How many were there? And then, but I think the person most in the wrong was this police officer. This is someone who joins in, you know, so that's what's really upsetting, actually. But as far as the driver, I don't know. I kind of think he deserves a bit of a pass because he had his baby in the vehicle, his wife. He was surrounded, nervous, and I'm sure he didn't want to run over someone, but it just happened. And it was an unfortunate incident. He didn't start it. He did finish it, but he didn't start it.
Right.
And it certainly is, I don't know if you've ever been surrounded by motorcycles as you're driving. It certainly is a little scary sometimes because you are afraid you're going to hit them.
Right. I think the saddest thing about this, in my opinion, is it's a pretty extreme example of mob violence and mob mentality, as I'm sure my colleague would agree. And what we really need to focus on is the whole idea that once a group sort of gets together and decides to do something like this, it's hard to talk them out of it, so to speak. And they're usually going to go from 0 to 60. And what I'm trying to say is they're going to do something really, really bad when you have that mob mentality and that group thing. So it's not, from a psychological perspective, that unusual. When groups get together, they're going to do something bad, like that group thing takes over, and anything can happen, and usually really, really bad things. And this is an example of that.
And it's usually, unfortunately, young men.
Yes.
Dr. Bart.
The psychology of this really comes down to personal responsibility. What happens in a mob or in a gang is that personal responsibility goes by the wayside sometimes, and people do things that they wouldn't do if they were one-to-one in a situation. In other words, they feel that in this case they got the bikers that with them, they're going to back them up, they've got their back, so they might act out impulsively or belligerently, which I think they did. I agree with Dee Dee on this. They really acted out on this, and I'm not sure that they would have done the same in terms of their behavior if it wasn't a gang mentality.
Now, do you think we would be talking about this had there not been like some video, but we seem to be talking about this, and of course with the fact that there was a police officer involved as well. Let's just transition a little bit into some of these cops. They're saying that there's a little bit more violence in the police world, and in fact there is a statistic that there are more police officers that are involved in violent attacks since September 11th. And I'd like to ask the two psychologists, two doctors here to explain that.
Right. I think that what's happening is because of, you know, we have these phones that can, you know, take pictures and videos and then social media, so instantaneously we can really get, in real time, some of these really horrific images, and that has a profound impact, which is why we're talking about it here today
well,
on your
if
show.
there were no videos, we wouldn't be talking about it.
And by the way, I think that people should do that more often. I think that people should use their phones as a way to speak truth to power.
And
Because
to
without
protect
that,
themselves.
right? Because without that evidence, we would not be here today. I'm sure they would have lied about it. We'd have never known that cops were involved. I mean, this is a really, really bad situation. The other thing I think.
Let me ask you another question on that. Is it fair to be policing the police, though?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, bad cop is bad.
Right.
And,
Yes.
I mean, there should be held to a higher standard.
And-
so that's unfortunate.
And the biggest problem we have with law enforcement is they police themselves. That's the biggest issue. You can't have the people who are behaving badly responsible for accountability. We should really have outside community-driven agencies who police the police. Unfortunately, that's politically unpopular for both Democrats and Republicans, and because of that, we deal with police oppression on a regular and consistent basis, whether you're rural, urban, suburban, black, white, green, yellow, gay, straight, and it's time for Americans and citizens to really stand up against this. Enough is enough.
Why do you think we're seeing, since the war on terror began in 2001, there's been so many reports that there are more police officers involved in violent attacks? Why do you think that is?
I tell you, I've done probably a few thousand evaluations of officer candidates, people who want to become police officers, and I'm a pretty big supporter of police, okay?
Absolutely.
However,
I think all of us here
are.
are.
Of course.
However, there's a core element within the police departments, and these guys get into the department to
And
be...
girls.
And girls, that's guys and girls, to be a little bit different, to use their power, use their authority, and be kind of difficult, belligerent, if you will,
Right.
Overly demanding,
Right.
and get their way with folks because they're a police officer. And that's really unfortunate, and that's why I do agree there needs to be some policing of the police, not because they're all bad guys or girls, women, but we have a situation where there's a certain personality type that's in the police department that's a problem personality, and it is there, and they ought to be aware of it.
Well, what about, obviously, they see some of the worst things in society. I don't think that any of us can disagree on that part.
So what?
Well, there has to be a way to deal with it from a
Right,
side
right.
to talk, and so maybe within the police department there should be ways to offer more counseling to police officers, especially in some of the real tough neighborhoods. I mean, if you're going to be a police officer in a nice suburban town or something where there's not much crime, that's one thing. But they're dealing with horrible hours, they're dealing with horrible situations, life and death situations. So, the problem is there's not enough resources now.
I don't know if that's true. I think that part of the issue, and he's talking about something that's really important that we don't discuss enough, and that is that certain people choose to go into law enforcement because they're looking to abuse power. Because
yeah,
the reality
I get that.
is, that's a certain core group, the reality is you have people who go into these professions who feel powerless, who feel like they don't have control over their lives, who want to act out aggressively. Some of them are dealing with undiagnosed, untreated trauma. You put on that uniform, that badge, you have a license to kill, literally.
But
And
don't
if
you
we're
think
not
most want to
careful,
help their communities, though? I mean, let's talk about I think the New York Police Department and Ray Kelly, I think they do a wonderful job. But, you do have to have a way of monitoring the bad ones. And they may get there and turn bad after the power turns them into monsters.
right, and I want to be very clear, as the founding director of the Center for the Prevention of School Age Violence at Drexel, I work with law enforcement at the federal, state, and local level, and they are excellent by and large. But as my colleague said, it's about the bad apples. Don't forget, though, that a bad apple can ruin the whole bunch. And if we
Absolutely.
can't get past this blue code, this blue wall of silence, I say to my colleagues all the time in law enforcement, they talk about stop snitching. I say, well, guess what? They learned that from you. You guys don't snitch when you should.
Yeah,
When there's
and-
terrible abuses, you
That
don't
helps
snitch.
the department to tell them the bad
Right,
ones.
I
You don't
agree.
want them
And to
part of your
Mia's
group.
point about counseling for the officers, I mean, the highest rate of suicide is really amongst police officers. I think psychologists and psychiatrists might be
Right,
next.
right, you're right.
But police officers, so they really do need a lot of counseling because of what you said before. They're really under a lot of stress, and they could be in a violent, very violent situation in a split second.
Snap.
So that's a lot of pressure, and then when it happens, they need to deal with it appropriately, and a lot of them don't. They don't know how to do it.
But in this world of war on terror since 2001, and I keep asking that because I found that to be fascinating when I was reading that the incidents have gone up so dramatically in the last 12 years.
I think it's because there's pressure on them to keep the homeland safe, including our neighborhoods, which, as you say, can be dangerous in some instances. But as my colleague mentioned, the biggest issue is probably untreated trauma and PTSD, which goes back to male culture. I don't hurt, I don't cry, nothing ever bothers me.
I think that's
so
true.
they carry that, right?
You're a cop.
And they wind up getting themselves hurt, sometimes
I think
kill
that's
them.
true.
But what if
I-
there's no resources at this point? I mean, like then what do they do? Mandatory requirements? I mean, the
Well, a lot
police
of
departments.
departments-
I mean, we know so many police departments are scaling back because they don't have the money. They can't even put enough cops out on the streets.
Well, a lot of them do have mandatory situation where they must go to counseling or their time off after an incident or something like that.
Absolutely.
But to your point, though, I think that what's happened over the last 11 or 12 years is that there's more exposure since 9/11 to police. So that particular core element that's a problematic sector of the police department, that's more coming to life now and more visible. That's what I think also, to the point.
What do you think should happen to this police officer? I mean, obviously everybody's watching this case.
Well, fired for sure.
Well,
but probably should serve some time. I mean, because I think it should be a higher standard if you're a police officer.
Amen. She said it.
But we don't want to blame the mom. I mean, that's not right because there were so many good ones. But this guy, bad guy, not right.
so there should be an example.
Prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Not an example, he broke the law.
Yes.
So prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and obviously he loses his badge to send a message.
I agree. It's got to be a result here. There's certain behavior. We needed a result.
A higher
now.
standard.
A higher. I agree with
They're
you. The higher
supposed to protect
standard.
us,
Right.
not be
That's
a
why when
sub.
you said, oh, they're stressed out. So what? There are
Get
things
out.
you can do to deal with that. That's why you're not a cop, and I'm not. But if you choose to wear that badge and that uniform, we expect you to behave in a certain manner.
to protect and serve.
That's
Let's
right.
talk about New York City and just in general. Some folks are saying you're seeing a little bit more violence.
You are.
Now, for a city that was considered the safest big city for many, many years, Chicago seems to have taken
That's right.
the top spot for being the most violent. But why is New York City, why are we seeing an increase?
And it's really sad because Giuliani, back in the day, instituted a very effective anti-crime, anti-violence policy. It wasn't perfect, and he violated some rights, and obviously we're still dealing with that stop and frisk being one of them. Federal judge just recently ruled that it was unconstitutional. We'll see what happens after that. So 75% decrease in crime when he was mayor, and now we see this uptick. Chicago's _1.
But go back to the stop and frisk.
Sure.
Why do you think that because stop and frisk has been stopped, do you think that is there a correlation?
I'm actually saying the exact opposite.
Okay.
I'm saying that because of stop and frisk, we see an increase in crime. See, the issue is that policing is not just about badges and guns and locking people up. It's about creating a community culture where there's respect with the police department, but also respect of the community residents and citizens. That doesn't exist when there's stop and frisk. When you're telling someone that looks like me, a young black male, in Brooklyn, right, or Bed-Stuy, I'm going to stop you just because your skin is brown and you're wearing a
But
hoodie.
that's not fair
That's
to
a
say that's
problem.
why they're doing that, though. I mean, just to say they're assuming they're going to do that because you're black, that's not right.
But that's what stop and frisk is.
No, if it's supposed to be what you're doing, I mean, if it's
But it's not.
suspicious.
Stop and
yes,
frisk
that's
means
part
that
of
I'm
it.
suspicious because I'm brown
Ray Kelly,
and I'm wearing a hoodie.
Look, I
Well,
think
I
that's
think-
fair to the unfair to the police department.
You can't put all police officers
Right,
in that
right,
category,
right.
of course.
No,
I'm just
no,
going to
but
have
you
final,
said-
very
okay.
quick final thoughts from everybody. Dee Dee?
Well, actually, I think still the new police department's doing a good job. This was unfortunate, so hopefully they'll crack down on the motorcycle guys because, they do this annually. They do this, every once in a while, so hopefully they'll be on watch for it, and this won't happen again.
Dr. Williams?
Police departments have to learn how to treat trauma, right? And also learn how to police to the extent that it's appropriate their own. But we really need a movement across this country for outside citizens advisory boards to police the police.
Absolutely agree with that. And Dr. Bart?
I think the New York Police Department is really going in the right direction. It's been going in the right direction. I think you used the right words. Uptick. Uptick. I don't think it's a big deal. I think that crime is going to be reasonably under control in New York. But I do think the police department needs to be aware of this gang mentality. And I think they are. I think they're on it. They're taking this case seriously.
And could change with a new mayor. Remember, we're getting a new mayor soon.
That's true. Well, that'll be very interesting to watch. Well, thank you very much for your insights, everybody. And when we return, it's the lightning round, and it's celebration time for both companies and individuals when we return.